Okay, I think we've got everybody logged on, starting at 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, and really looking forward to this. This is our eighth industry expert webinar we're closing out the year with, and very excited about this. And so let me. Most of you know me or know what I do, but for those of you that are on this that don't know me, I'm Jim Zasowski, and I'm president and founder of Z1 Career Zone, and we're a career coaching firm, okay, and we provide solutions for a number of different individuals. It could be people that are out of work, that are struggling to get back in the workforce. It could be individuals that are going through career transitions, or even, one of the 71%, believe it or not, of people in the United States in professional jobs that literally hate what they're doing and disengaged at work. And we actually have a couple of offerings. We have our premier program, which is our online curriculum. Think of it like a semester's worth of class, okay? And we couple that with a professional coach. So you have a professional coach for 3 months throughout the program. And we also offer our new on-demand program, which is you can do it on demand, on your own time, go through the curriculum at your pace. And you also have the opportunity, if you want it, if you need a coach, you need a little accountability or some extra help, we provide our coaches on an hourly basis if you like that. Serving multiple markets. We serve colleges and universities. We've got clients that have undergraduates going through our program right now, but also alumni that they serve. We also have clients that are in the professional sports industry, NFL, Major League Baseball, and it's those individuals that are transitioning out of the professional sports and into the real world, and military veterans transitioning into civilian life. So there's, as you can imagine, there's a lot of applications. We also have clients that really anybody that serves an alumni association of any sort can really benefit from this program as well, and we've got a number of those. So that's us, and let me give you some ground rules that we have each month as we do these. You're going to notice that your mic has been muted, so we avoid any interruptions during the webinar. Now, if you've got questions or comments at any time, during this webinar, please go to our Q&A feature, okay, and go ahead and ask that question. And at the end, we're going to answer as many of those as possible. And if we can't get to all of them, we will certainly follow up in writing to you and get those questions answered. And the last thing, really encourage you, if you haven't done this before, go to our Instagram or even Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever you prefer. Type in Z1 Career Zone and follow us there. And we continue to provide articles free of charge, advice, tips, tools, and all that. You're going to understand what upcoming webinars we're about to have. And actually, here in about 2 weeks, we're going to send out our complete 12-month webinar series for every month that we've got laid out for 2021. We've got outstanding speakers that are already lined up. You'll know who they are, what the subjects they're going to be speaking about, and which month, date, time, and all that, so you could put that on your calendar if it interests you. So be sure to do that if you haven't done that before. So now I get to introduce our industry expert for this for today. And as you can imagine, yes, there's familiarity in the last name. Nick is my son, and I got to tell you, this is very exciting for me to be able to do something business-wise with my son Nick. And but I'll tell you, I have criteria for our industry experts, and Nick checks every box. It's not because he's my son doing this. Nick is absolutely an expert in his field. He is the director of Global Startup Studio Network, and you're going to hear a lot about what that's about. And I will say, not only is he an expert here in the U.S., but Nick is considered an expert worldwide, and you're going to find out exactly why that is. So this is going to be an interesting session, because if you're like me and a lot of others, and I'm guessing perhaps I know we've got over 100 people on this. You've all been there, right? Where you have this idea, and you think, how do I take this idea and make it into a company, right? Or you're wondering, man, how did they actually take that idea when you see it happening, and now it's a real company, they've got real investors, they've got real buying clients. How did that all happen? And so if you're like me and all that, you're going to really enjoy this. And I'll tell you, when Nick got into this business several years ago, I didn't understand what accelerators were or studios were, and I found out very quickly that it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's fascinating. So if you know nothing about it, you're going to get that education today, and so I'm really happy, really excited to have you here, Nick, and we're going to do this in a format, really an interviewing format. But the first thing that I'm going to do is, Nick, I'm going to ask you to really walk through, kind of take us through what it is that you do, right? What are accelerators? What's the history behind that, right? And what are studios? What are they, and what's the history behind them? And so Nick knew I was going to have him do that, because I know a lot of people on here have perhaps never heard of accelerators or studios. And so that's going to be real important. So he's prepared some slides to walk through that. And then when he's done with that, it's going to be back to just a question answer. I've got some questions that I'm going to ask Nick, and he'll respond to those. And then we'll get to the Q&A after that. So Nick, it's great to have you here with us. And I'm going to stop sharing here so I could give you control of your slides here. Okay.
Awesome. Sounds good. Yeah. And for people listening in too, I think it was the early days of Z1 Career Zone before it was when you came out and talked to me and our fraternity. And I still get pictures sent from my buddies of walking through your criteria and interview prep that's helping them get jobs.
That's great.
It's fun. It's fun. So let me, I'll open up, and thanks again for creating the space to share this stuff. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit first of why, and my final plug for Z1 Career Zone. But this is really some of the things that I was looking into for companies, of like, what's their why behind what they're doing. And this is why I do what I do every morning, and why our company does what we do every day at GAN and GSSN. And it all goes back to this Kaufman study. So we exist and we wake up every day, and it's our CEO's just vision and goal to help the job creators and to generate wealth, which then in turn expands and grows the economy. And the way you do that is through startups. So this one graph explains it all. The yellow line is companies that are 11 years or older, and the amount of job creation that they bring to the economy. And the middle line being 0 jobs created. So you see the big dip. The study was done after the last recession in 2009. The red line is companies that are between 6 and 10 years of age. So they ride that. They're not necessarily creating jobs, but they're not losing jobs either. And then you see startups and early stage companies as the blue line. So you see that they're riding up there. And even when they dipped in 2009 for the last recession, they were still creating jobs. And that's why we get excited. And especially recently over the last year, through all of the pandemic and what's happened, we get excited because we know that we're working with accelerators and studios, like we'll talk about today, who are the ones that are creating jobs. So diving into your question of what are accelerators, the history. This is our ecosystem. So we work with 105 accelerators all around the globe in over 150 cities. And this is a lot of where the data that's coming from that I'll talk about today is coming from this network that we've built and grown over the last 10 years. So what are accelerators, and what do they typically do? So they're cohort-based, mentorship-driven, and short-term timeline. So with them being cohort-based, they're working with, there's 9.6 is the average number of startups that are in your average accelerator. So they're all learning from being around other startups, other CEOs, get to interact with other CEOs during those early stages, early years of the company where learning and being formed is most important. So we actually only work with accelerators that bring CEOs together so they can learn from their peers versus learning from others. Next to the mentorship, the average accelerator has 50 mentors that are involved with their accelerator. And this is important because let's say you're starting an agriculture technology business. You want to be looking for an accelerator that has mentors in that space to help you both meet new people, grow, and do all of those things. And then finally, short term. So accelerators are typically a 16-week cycle that you're working with them, and it's intentional. So a phrase that's come up a lot with COVID, and this already existed before with accelerators, is there is with constraint comes creativity. And I think the best example that I've seen of that over the last 8 months with COVID is with restaurants. They've had to become creative with the QR code menus, or with having to get on like a delivery service, because it's survive or die for them. And that's what these accelerators are trying to create, is almost like a fictional survive or die environment where you just crank it out for 16 weeks to build and grow quickly. And then finally, 75% of startups that we get to work with through our accelerators are still in business today or have exited or been acquired. And that's since 2010 that we've been tracking this data. So over 13,000 startups. And the industry average is a 10% success rate. So pretty impressive metrics there. And then a couple case studies of accelerators that are out there. So Techstars is a really popular one, and two companies that have come out of their accelerator program, ClassPass, which is a fitness membership platform, and then also SendGrid, which was recently acquired by Twilio for $1 billion, was out of here, grown out of Boulder. And then another example, Flat Six Labs, they have 6 locations in the Middle East and North African region. I got the opportunity to meet them in Bahrain this time last year when traveling existed. So that was fun. And they have over 200 mentors, 6 locations, 700 jobs created. I just want to zone in on that number. That's what gets us excited about working with them, to see that in the Middle East, they're creating those jobs, generating wealth, and supporting those economies that, quite frankly, as they look ahead in the Middle East, oil, there's only so much oil being a natural resource, that now they're investing in startups to build their economy moving forward. So that's a little bit on accelerators, and then diving into the studios. And this is where I get excited and where I spend a lot of my time. This is a map of the world. So this is literally, the dots are all of the studios that exist in the world, and they're growing pretty quickly. So here's a chart showing the growth of studios over the years. So each section you'll see is different. So there's 560 in the world, and over half of those have started and been created in the last 5 years. So we're seeing crazy growth in this industry and in this asset class that we'll talk about. And then here are some of the waves. So starting in 1996, Idealab out of Los Angeles. Bill Gross is a very famous name out there in company creation. He started their studio, and then as they have gone through, Rocket Internet is over in Europe, and literally they're just copying companies and then rebuilding them in Europe that exist in the US. HelloFresh is one of their companies. Wave 2 is 2011, 2012, and then wave 3 as startup studios started to take shape, take form, and become this new asset class. So what do studios do? They create companies. So that's a big differentiator from accelerators. Accelerators help existing companies. Studios create them. They invest starting capital into these startups. So when on day one, they're infusing 300 or on average $500,000 to start this company so that they can pay the CEO, pay the CTO, and help them build their products and go from there. And then finally, they're institutional co-founders. So you come in, you create your company on day one, you have a team of 40 sitting next to you that's able to help you grow and scale. So they create, as they're creating companies, they have this objective process to how they're building companies. So they're ideating. They're always saying, what are we building? What's the next opportunity out there? How do we make it? How do we make that next company? Validation. How then we take 1 week to 2 months and we validate that idea before we create it. We go ask, I'm going to ask Jim, hey, does this platform work for college students that are looking for jobs? And they go test and they iterate it. And then once they realize, oh shoot, there's a huge market out there for this, let's go create it. Let's go find a CEO, let's build it, and then we'll spin it out and start generating revenue. Some of the numbers on studios, the average equity stake that these studios get because of the capital and because of the resources that they're providing is 35% of the business. So it'd be just like if you're a founder, you have 2 co-founders, you're getting that 33% share. The speed that they're able to move compared to a traditional startup. So here's a graph showing that startup studios get to Series A, which in 25 months, which your traditional startup takes about 55, 56 months to get to that same stage. So they're able to accelerate the growth of these companies at an exponential rate. 91% of startups that are created in GSSN studios are still in business today or have been acquired. So they're literally flipping the script on the way that startups, on startup success there. A couple stories from studios. Everybody might be familiar, hopefully you're familiar with Dollar Shave Club. They were actually born out of a startup studio. In their first and second years of operations with the studio, they went from $4 million in revenue to $65 million in revenue within 1 year. And it's working with the studio that helped lay that foundation to grow. And then they are acquired by Unilever in 2016 for $1 billion. Another example, most recently, Snowflake IPO'd their data warehousing company. Their IPO was worth $70 billion. And Sutter Hill Ventures, who's the studio that created them, because they were in there in the early days, they had those founder shares as being an institutional co-founder. So their value at the IPO was $12 billion being a co-founder with them. So those are a couple examples. And then my final one is bringing both together, accelerators and studios. So Y Combinator is a famous accelerator. eFounders is a famous studio out of Paris and Brussels. What eFounders did is they created this customer communication platform in Europe, and they partnered with an accelerator, Y Combinator, in the US to help them gain the US market and get those mentors that I talked about and the ability to grow. So that's a little bit about accelerators and studios before we dive in, and excited to get into the questions here. So
Yeah. Well, Nick, I know that when I was first learned about this, when you got into it, I was fascinated by it, and then I found out, and you knew this, right? That basically every Fortune 100 company out there has an accelerator within their company, right? And so, and they've had it for many years. So, can you share, why are these Comcast? Perfect example. Everybody knows Comcast. They've got an accelerator, right? And I go on, and they've invested millions of dollars to be able to, have these in house. So, what is it that they hope to achieve by doing that? Can you say that in layman's terms? You know what I mean? So,
great question and great example too. Comcast is one of our customers. So
I didn't even know that.
But so yeah, there's really three
That's
main
good.
reasons why these corporations are working with accelerators or building their own internal ones or partnering with an accelerator like Techstars. And really, they get the first line of sight to startups. So if they want to be like Comcast, they may want to be a customer for this startup. And so first they're going to invest in them. Then they know that they're going to be getting revenue because they're investing in these startups, and they know the market. So they can sit there as a mentor and help connect them with other players in the industry. Second, they know exactly what the market is looking for. So Comcast, what are they projecting, or what is their 5-year strategic plan? They're going to start sourcing for startups. So accelerators, partnering with an accelerator, building an accelerator, they start bringing in 10 companies. Air Force is a great example. We worked with them on an opportunity where they wanted to have the best helmet for their pilots. So they reached out to us. They said, hey, bring us 10 startups that can build a helmet and help us create the best next helmet for our pilots. So we go out, we bring them 10 startups, and then those 10 startups were essentially battling for their business. And
Right,
then,
right,
and then finally, they have the money and resources to be doing this. So
right,
your average company or your average startup may not be able to build a helmet on their own, but if they can
right.
partner with Air Force, then they can go out and get the money, get the resources, and especially get the mentorship and the connections within
Yeah,
the Air Force in that example to
yeah.
build. So yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And do you see a lot where these companies, when they invest in them, eventually buy them out and just say, "Hey, it's worth having them." You know what I mean?
Yeah, some do. So some corporations, I'm trying to, I can't think of a great example off the top of my head, but they'll be the only ones investing in these startups.
Right,
And a big company the size of Google, it may only be for internal use purposes, and then they buy them out and spin them into their own company.
right.
Salesforce does that a lot too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, my second question is this: you're seeing this trend of, I think of, are you seeing a trend of companies adding studios to really their business model? And if so, you know, what are they hoping to achieve from that? Right.
Yeah. For sure. So the answer is yes. Corporations are moving to this studio model and either running them in parallel. So you have accelerators where it's you take a lot of shots on goal. You're working with 10 companies, but you're even sourcing another 100 companies to whittle down to that 10. What corporations do in building a studio is then they say, we know exactly what we want. This Air Force example actually would have been a great use case for a studio. We know exactly what we want. We want this helmet. We're going to bring in and build a team around this. So instead of getting a company that manufactures baseball helmets, another company that works in like hard plastics to try to fit in their like 80% of what they do well. We're going to
Right.
bring in the CEO from each of these companies and start our own company to then build exactly what it is we're looking for. So we're seeing
Wow.
studios
Yeah. Yeah.
in corporations more because now corporations are like, I want this. I don't want to buy or invest in 80% of that with a company, but I'm going to build exactly what I need. And then they have equity in it and it's a new stream of revenue
Right.
for these corporations.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, they're able to share resources. So the startup, now that they're building, the corporation has their legal team, accounting, finance, HR. So it saves the startup a ton of money now that they're able to share the resources of the corporation, but they can
Right. Right.
also sit outside of the walls and move fast outside of the slow, lethargic movement of corporations sometimes. So
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. All right. So let's get to a couple questions I think the audience wants to hear. I'm assuming this. So if somebody had, you know, they got a great idea, Nick. Okay, they got this idea, right? And but perhaps don't have the funds, right, to support it, get it going, get it off the ground. And frankly, maybe they don't even have, marketing expertise, sales expertise, and or even the business knowledge to get it going. So, what advice would you give, or offer to help these normal people like me and you out there, right, to get to that next step or that next level? What do they do?
Yeah. So what advice would I have for people that like have an idea and are
Yeah.
looking to get to the next level?
Yep.
Yeah. First, I would say if you're alone, look for a co-founder. So the biggest thing that investors are looking for in the startup world is, and if Techstars coined this, are looking for team, team, team. Are their first three criteria in making an investment. So that's the same thing if you're working with an accelerator. If you're a solo entrepreneur, investors are probably just going to pass over you. So first, look
Really?
for a co-founder that's going to fill in your gaps. So, for example,
Okay. Yeah.
if you're a technical co-founder, I know how to code, I know how to develop and build all these crazy products, but I don't want to talk to people. I don't know how to sell. I don't want to go out and do those like uncomfortable meetings and conversations, or build a
Right.
book of business. Look for a co-founder that fills that gap.
Gotcha.
So that'd be the first piece of advice, is where can you fill in your gaps with your team.
Okay.
And then in working with studios and accelerators, that's just like the next level up. Look for the accelerator that has mentors that are going to allow you to open doors. Great example, working with government contracts. There's an accelerator out there called Decode, and what they do is they specialize in helping startups get access to the government, because it's so hard to
Mm,
break into government
yeah.
contracts that they know all the top ranking officials and all the government entities, that they're making those connections and opening those doors and doing those things. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's great. Yeah, because that's working with the government, my gosh, and grants and this, all that kind of stuff. No, that's great. So, okay, so let's take a lot of our clients, people looking for jobs, right? All this kind of stuff, and perhaps there's a lot of people on there on this call right now. What would be the relevance of a studio or an accelerator for them,
Yeah.
right?
Uh, Huge opportunity if you're looking for jobs with accelerators and studios. So if
Really?
you're
Okay.
yeah, if you're looking for jobs, so again, back to that first slide, why do we do what we do?
Right.
It's to connect, or it's to help create more jobs, and the people that are creating these jobs are the startups, and the
Right.
people working with these startups are the accelerators or the studios. So on the studio front, one popular and well-known studio is High Alpha. They're based in Indianapolis. And when you go and look on their website and you look at their careers page or their jobs page, they're always looking for to connect with a future CEO, because that's their hardest thing, is finding somebody to run their next company. But
Okay.
they also have their whole portfolio of 25 companies and their job openings. So
Oh,
you go on
wow.
their
Yeah.
website, you're probably going to see over 100 job openings, because not only is it the studio, but they're helping out their portfolio of startups too.
Right.
So go there and you can just like, they have them all listed out. So uh,
Wow.
with the startups and with these accelerators and with these studios, if you're looking for a job, especially if you're coming out of college, it's a fast-paced MBA where you get in on the ground floor on a company. They're looking quite frankly, they're looking for cheap labor, but
Right.
you're going
Right.
to get access. You're going to get that access to business conversations at an early age that you might not get access to
Yeah.
at a larger corporation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
And I know you specifically, that's been big for you with what you're doing, is hearing those conversations at such a young age, right? Where In the corporate world, I'm telling you, until you get to the C-suite, you're not even coming close to some of those things. So, no, that's great advice. Now, this white paper that you wrote that was published last month, right, is titled "Disrupting the Venture Landscape and Why the Studio Model is Where Investors Find Capital Efficiency." And you offered some really good statistics in there, and you shared some things in this. And by the way, for those that are on the call, that link to that white paper was on the registration thing, but we're going to be providing that again for people to read, because it's a really good read to really fully understand a lot of these stats and where this business is going. So where do you see studios going 5 years from now? What's it going to look like
Yeah,
in your opinion?
yeah.
Yeah.
So a few statistics, and then how it blends into the
Okay.
five year, I guess, crystal ball that I have, that we'll see if it turns out.
Yeah.
But the studio growth first has doubled in that slide that I showed, has doubled in the last 4 years from the previous 20 years. So seeing that kind of growth, I think looking ahead 5 years from now, if it's not doubling, I think it'll be more. So right now we have roughly 600 studios in the world.
Okay.
We'll at least have 1,200, if not more, 5 years from now. So that may be an
Wow.
opportunity if you're looking for a job or looking to start your own thing. That's another way to look, or another industry to be looking at. Speed of growth, again, to that one graph with the two lines of how quickly studios are growing and getting to certain like I'm trying to think what the right word is, but when they get to certain stage gates or
Okay. Yeah.
processes in building their company, so getting to revenue, getting to $1 million in revenue per year and all those things, investors are now starting to turn an eye towards studios and pumping money into them. So studios are becoming another asset class that's commonly known, like accelerators and incubators. So they're going to be well known. And then finally, IRR, which stands for internal rate of return, which is
Mhm.
just your rate of return, is right now for studios. And the research that we did is 53%. And if you don't know what rate of return means in comparison, the top venture capital firms have 30% return. That's the top. The
That's
top,
outstanding.
the top accelerators have 20%, and
Wow.
the S&P 500 is 10%. So just to
Wow.
put all of those in comparison, so it's going to be somewhere that a lot of entrepreneurial talent starts looking towards in the next 5 years. So.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. And one other question, we've had several questions come in. I'm going to get to those now, but this one that came in, I think I'm going to read it off right now because I think it's an interesting question. It says, where do incubators sit in the spectrum versus studios and accelerators, early stage startup support question mark?
Yeah. That's a great question.
That is.
So how we define them differently is like we said with those three criteria of accelerators. They're short-term, cohort-driven, mentorship-led. Studios, they're creating businesses, they're institutional co-founders, and they provide capital. Incubators are kind of in the middle. They don't have a short time frame, so they don't fit in the same bucket as accelerators. So that's why we don't define them the same as accelerators. And then from a studio perspective, they're providing like resources and support, kind of like an institutional co-founder, but they're not putting in all of that starting capital, or their team is not like in the trenches with the startup, creating the company, coming up with the idea, and doing
Mhm.
all of those like really hands-on support resources. But all three of them, I believe, can work together to support like one ecosystem. So I think
Yeah.
incubators, accelerators, and studios are necessary in every corporation, in every city, because they all have a place dependent on what a founder, what an entrepreneur, what a team needs.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I
So
gotcha.
that would be where I see all of those fitting, and you would like them all to be in the same building or in the same
Right.
space
Right.
and cooperating. So that's a good
It's a
question.
really good question. Yeah.
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 Uh,
Yeah. We got a couple others that are here. When looking around the globe, what are investors looking for and what makes the most successful startups?
yeah. So the most successful startups, again, back to team and what investors are looking at. So it'd be team, traction, and then the market opportunity out there. So, and breaking down each one team. So, investors are looking at either A, have you done this before? So, you're about to start a company.
Right.
You started a company before. Have you grown it? Have you scaled it? Or did you fail? What did you learn from that failure?
Right.
And who's in your network so you can build a strong team around you. Next is traction. So, do you have revenue, or what are your connections to generate revenue?
Right.
And then the final piece is, shoot, I blanked on what I just said.
That's all right.
But on oh yeah, on like the problem, like what is the problem that you're solving for? What's the opportunity out there? Because if you can't put your finger on the problem, like a lot of people in 2019, the big joke was a lot of startups were starting dog walking apps, and that's not solving a true problem in the world. And I think entrepreneurship
Gotcha.
came back to its roots in 2020 of solving real problems. So what's inefficient in healthcare? What's inefficient or what's not working in government? Or what's going on in education? And what
Right.
technology do we need to start inserting into these old industries to help them come up to speed? Really.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. So why would working with an accelerator or studio make sense for me and my startup? That was the very first question that came in. Why would it make sense for me? I guess maybe you need to know more information, but um, maybe you can fill in some blanks there.
Yeah. Why would it make sense for me to work? So I would say first, it's not a
Working like with an accelerator is what
yeah.
they stated. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's not for everybody. Would be my first answer to that.
Right.
There are a lot of people that have Mark Zuckerberg in creating Facebook did it on their own, and there's unique circumstances where you can do that and you can make it work. And then there's other people. So SendGrid was an
Right.
example thrown out
Right.
earlier. The CEO of that company, a bunch of studios were chasing down uh, that CEO because it was like, hey, he started his company, he grew it, he scaled it. But if you don't have an idea
Right.
for your second go around, a studio is a great team to work with because they've done the vetting of the idea. They've validated that this company does have a good market to go into. And now they're just looking for a solid CEO to help build and grow and scale this company. So if you're an executive or you've built and grown teams or companies in the past or
Right.
products, a studio would be a great fit for you. And then finally, accelerators. I think the best fit for an accelerator is if you have this gap you're trying to solve for. You're trying to get this like key customer that's going to help you really like just hit that next level
Right. Right.
of growth, or they're really there for that 16 months. What are your couple goal, or 16 weeks, what are your couple goals that you want to reach as a startup? And then vet who you're looking for. So you're not going to go join an ag tech accelerator if you're building a sports technology company.
Right. Right. Right.
uh, so vet who those mentors are that are going to help open doors for you so that then your company is off and running. So
Okay. And that was one of the other questions. They said, how do you know which accelerator, to go to? And I think you were kind of answering that, is that there's accelerators for different markets, technologies, whatever, right? And they specialize in that, right?
Yeah.
if I understand it correctly. So like, I know the big one in Boulder, Colorado is called Boomtown, right?
Yep.
So give me an example. What's their specialty? Like, what kind of startups do, people come to them and ideas, right? And they say, and Nick, if I understand this correctly, so if you went to an accelerator website, they take applications, is that right? And so people fill out these, here's my idea, here's all the stuff, I'm answering all your questions. They get hundreds of these, right? And out of those hundreds, they just select like the top 10, right? Maybe that they say, hey, you guys, based on what we're hearing, you guys have a really great shot at making money. So we're going to bring you in and help build that thing or help you build that thing. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So the average acceptance rate for a GAN, and this is only our company, a GAN accelerator, is like 2.5%. So it's
Oh,
actually
wow.
easier. It's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get into a GAN accelerator. Is the joke there? So
Wow.
it is pretty hard, and they're looking at thousands of applicants. Then they're whittling it down to 100. Then they interview those 100, and then from there, yeah, they whittle it down to 10.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's how
And
it
then,
works. And
and then
just like
they, yeah. And so then they would bring those 10 into like Boulder, right? For 3, 4 months and help them create whatever they need to do to then, right, get investors, right? Create the marketing plan, create the pitch, right? And the little bit I know about it is because you invited me to this thing called demo days, right? When they're kind of going to school, building their company, and accelerators are helping them do that, and then they help them. I mean, this was pretty cool. I mean, we went there, and in the Boulder Theater, right, there's these 10 companies that had just graduated their school, so to speak, and they go on stage and they give their 10-minute spiel. And in the audience, there's these dozens and dozens of investors listening to this. It was amazing. It was cool. And then,
one was Emmanuel Sanders startup, right?
yeah,
Uh,
it
they
was.
had the auto signature or online signature
Yeah.
company.
So
So,
for those of you who don't know who Emmanuel Sanders is, was a wide receiver for the Broncos. Now I think he's with the Saints. But yeah, he was an investor in this. Do you remember what that company was? It was
yeah,
fascinating.
they could download pictures of athletes, and then you give the athlete your iPad, and they just signed the picture on the iPad, and they were able to like send it off to 1,000 people. So,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. It was crazy, but that was really, really, really fascinating. So anyway, let me see. We got a couple more questions here. One is, uh, yeah, what's the, and we were touching on this really, what's the best way to get connected to to a studio or an accelerator? And you were kind of touching on this application stuff we talked about. Um,
so, uh, so great question. And this actually goes in with a lot of what you teach at Z1 Career Zone for finding jobs. But a lot of it is about your network.
yeah,
If you're applying, like if you're applying, you're one out of 1,000 people, it's not the easiest process. So what are the connections you can start building?
yeah,
So to answer that question, it's find either your local accelerator or studio that you want to be connected with, or find the accelerator studio if they're out of town that you want to be connected with. I keep using sports tech as an example, and
yeah.
Boomtown does sports technology.
Oh, interesting.
But find them on LinkedIn and invite them to coffee just to pick their brain,
Okay.
and understand what they're doing. The one saying and venture capital and in raising money is if you ask for money, you'll get advice, and if you ask for advice, you'll get money. So just start reaching out to people and trying to learn what they're doing. They're just as interested in getting to know others in their community as well, because they're looking to invest in
Sure.
people and in startups. So just reach out. The startup community is pretty friendly. and open to wanting to connect. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Hey, we got a few more questions here, and I think that'll take us to the end. So I get this one. How much money do emerging studios raise on average?
Yeah.
Is that a
So
correct question? Is that yeah?
so I'll answer this in two ways. Operating expenses. So the average for building a startup is around $500,000.
Okay.
And then there's two. I don't want to go break me out of the weeds if I got too far into the weeds, but there's two structures of studios. One is a holding company where they build a bunch of
Okay.
companies underneath it, and one is a fund where they invest in one-off companies that they're building. When they're doing a holding company, they raise one round of funding. That's usually around $10 million.
Okay.
And then the other ones that are raising a fund, they're raising, and the reason why they're doing that is they're going to use the revenue from those businesses to build more. Think of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
The other way is raising a fund, and that fund expires in 10 years. You pay back your investors, and those are usually averaging anywhere that starts at 10 million. There was one studio, Atomic in San Francisco, just raised a $210 million round. So,
Wow.
but
Wow.
now you have to go build $210 million worth of companies and invest that money in
Right.
the next 5 years, because then you need to pay back and you need time for those companies to mature for the next 5 to pay back your investors.
Right.
So,
Right.
those are the two routes that people go. So,
Yeah. No, that's
uh,
great.
hopefully that
This
answers your
this
question.
is a really good question here. How are they vetting the mentors? How are they finding these mentors? I think that's a really good question.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest struggles of accelerators. And honestly, we have an application process for the accelerators in our network, and one of them is understanding how many mentors are in your network and what's the quality of them, because it is really hard. A lot of them create criteria and like a rule book of the mentors that they're
Right.
working with.
Right.
So others start working with corporations. So I'm in supply chain, and I'm going to start working with people at UPS and FedEx and Amazon to
Okay.
mentor my startups and help my startups. And then it is a bit of a gut check where you don't want bad actors, like
Right.
if Amazon came in and just stole the idea and then your startups hung out to dry.
Right. Right.
That's part of the process, and really just working your network and
Yeah.
trying to find out who are the movers and shakers,
Yeah.
either in your industry, in your city,
Yeah.
whatever route or vertical you're looking to go.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, that's great. Here's the next. We'll do two more, and this one's thanks for being here, Nick. Love learning more about the entrepreneurial ecosystem. GSSN is growing for individuals young in their career, because we got all kinds of people on this thing. I know that just out of college, and this is from Justin. I know who he is. Who would someday like to be a part of a studio? What steps could we start taking to grow a desirable background?
yeah, I love that
I
question.
do too.
So
And not surprising coming from Justin. I know this
okay.
young man, and he is one sharp kid.
Yeah. Well, first I'll throw out the offer for Justin and anybody else on the call. If you want to connect after to talk further, would love to chat through that more. I'm gonna reread that question one more time. What steps could we start taking? Um, I would honestly start reaching out. Studios, specifically, especially, I keep saying especially during COVID, but during
Yeah.
COVID, with students either taking time off, like a gap year, or in the summer, studios are partnering with their local universities to
Mm,
help them with internships if you want to learn more about venture or about business development or marketing or sales. So I would either work with find a local studio. If you don't know, reach out to me and I'll get you connected to somebody. And then B, your entrepreneurial like program at your university.
Right.
And then just start meeting people, and every time you meet with somebody, ask them for the next connection. Never leave a meeting of like with coffee with anybody not asking for like, hey, who else would you recommend that I
Right.
connect with,
Right. Right.
as an opportunity. But as far as a desirable background, specifically to that, um, I would say just start if you're wanting to be a CEO, start something. Just start building and start doing your own thing. And just start trying to learn and grow and iterate, and even try to connect with a local, whether it's like a small business association
Yeah.
or anything like that, and start learning there. And yeah, as far as a desirable background, just start doing things and putting it on paper.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably the
No,
biggest
that's great. We're going to finish with one last question, but I'll read this comment because it'll make your day. I've learned so much. So is capitalized tonight. Wow, thank you. Looking forward to reading Nick's white paper, knowing what I learned tonight. So there you go, little feather in your cap there tonight, Nick. But here's my last question, and this is really my question. It didn't come in, and so we're going to be providing your white paper following this, but what other resources would you recommend to people to connect with in order to better understand how their idea or concept might be something that can turn into a successful business? What are the resources are out there for people?
Yeah. So one I already commented on was get involved in your local ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
There's a organization called 1 Million Cups, where it's just this like organic gathering of people, and
Right.
certain cities have different chapters. Another would be and then reaching out to your local accelerators, or your local studios. And then I would say there's a few books that I highly recommend.
Okay.
I wrote these down before jumping on because I knew I mentioned them. But New to Big, written by Christina Wallace, is on corporate innovation and how to build your corporate innovation structure and how that should look. One is The Startup Community Way by Brad Feld. He's based here in Boulder, and it talks about
Over to him.
how he built the Boulder startup ecosystem and how it helps others grow as well. A book, This is Marketing by Seth Godin. If you're in your early
Oh
days,
yeah.
how do you find your niche and your focus, and then really grow and build from there?
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth and final one is 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel. He's one of the co-founders of PayPal. For those of you out there
Oh
that have
yeah.
heard of PayPal Mafia, he's one of them, and he's one of the big investors in Atomic, who's one of the more well-known studios as well out there. So those are the four books that I recommend. And then finally, TechStars has a great resources page for startups and entrepreneurs.
On their
So
website.
on their website, yeah,
Okay.
just start digging around. They have tons of free content helping people out, and learning everything from how do you design a term sheet or a cap table if you're getting investors in your startup, to uh, how do I get my first customer and what does that look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it really does range on a wide array of things.
Yeah,
So
and I'll if Nick, I'll include those books for people that may not gotten that written down or whatever, but I'll include the list of those, the author, when we resend the white paper, and as well. And so and again, if you're interested in some of this subject, and Nick does a weekly newsletter out there, and I know it's a lot, it's read by investors mostly, and studios and things like that, which is going out to all over the place, and very widely read. I know your newsletter and blog, but is that something that people might be interested in, Nick? I
yeah, yeah. If
I
you want,
don't know.
feel free to subscribe. And if you don't like it, unsubscribe a couple weeks later. So
Well, we'll
yeah,
put that out, how you do that, or mention how you do that. How do you
yeah.
subscribe to your thing?
So you can just go to our website, gssn.co, no M, so gssn.co. And on the bottom, you can subscribe to our newsletter there. And then if you go to the studios page, this is just a plug more for Justin and anybody else out there interested in jobs at studios or getting connected.
Yeah.
Go to our studios page and you'll see the list of all of our studios in our network. And then go to their career page and you'll have more than enough jobs to be looking at, or just seeing what studios are doing and what they're hiring for, whether it's the studio themselves or
Right.
the studio portfolio companies. That's a great opportunity to dig around there. They have they work like a corporation where they provide structure, but they're each individual startups and their own business. So it's kind of a best of both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks. This is great, man. I got to tell you. Yeah. It was
fun. Yeah.
fun. It's so much fun for me. And believe me, I learned more tonight too than I knew. And so hope that those of you that are on this got something out of it and enjoyed learning something that perhaps you didn't know before. So Nick, thanks for sharing that with everybody, and really, really appreciate it. So good job. Good
Yeah.
job. Great
Yeah.
job.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
You're
Our generational differences with your headset and my no
this
headset
this
is
tells you everything about generational differences right there. So I'm going to be
thanks
upgrading.
everybody for jumping on.
Okay, I'm going to real quick, I'm just going to share with you my screen here one more time, because I want to introduce our next let me see. Nick, do I need to get sharing? No, I should be able to do this. I don't know why it's not
Yeah,
advancing.
I see it.
Oh, there we go. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, our next industry expert is in January, and it's the first. It's always, unless there's a holiday, it's always the first Wednesday in January. And this guy, Bill Roth, is an amazing guy. I've only known Bill for a year, and his background is incredible. I mean, if you are back in the day, if you remember the USFL, United States Football League, that started to compete with the NFL and was getting all the top picks. I mean, Herschel Walker, Jim Kelly, that they had all of them, man. And this thing was really running great. In fact, Donald Trump owned the New Jersey Generals, and Bill actually was in ownership with the Denver Gold, which was one of those teams. And his experiences are incredible. And he's run a big time marketing organization that serviced the biggest named companies in the world, Microsoft, as an example. Bill built from literally leaving college in Missouri. He came over to Denver and just asked, who's the most successful business person in Denver? And he kept getting the same name, and went over, met the guy, started working for the Denver Athletic Club, cleaning towels. And it ends up in no time, he's advanced, ran and built the Denver Athletic Club throughout Denver community. If you're from Denver, you know all about the Denver Athletic Club. And then he left corporate world and really followed what he felt was a calling, and worked with an organization that was a home and school for abused children and things like that. The guy's got a heart of gold. And first time I met him, I remember calling him back and said, Bill, I gotta meet you again, because I gotta hear more of your story. And I was blown away. I mean, he's got such wisdom. And right now he's the founder. He's had this for 10 years, founder of Basic Team, which is really helping people that have the idea about, how do you go about, even thinking about businesses, right? And he does career coaching and things like that. And I've just been so fascinated with him and his story that he's going to be able to share and advice as it relates to really all of that. He's going to share his success principles for not only winning in the sport of business, but also in the sport of life. And I can't wait to have him kick off our 2021 series. So that's Bill. You'll be getting more on him later. And so for everybody out there, thanks for being on this thing. Nick, thanks again. And I wish everybody upcoming blessed holiday, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, whatever you're celebrating with your family and friends. Just really be safe and enjoy these upcoming holidays. And we'll see you next month. All right. So take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.